welcome to this edition of Firefighting Fridays. I'm Jeff Diederich with Strategic Fire Training. In today's discussion, of course, we have Jeff Shupe, Jerry Knapp, John Mateer, and Chad Gruver rounding out the group for us tonight. We're going to be discussing strategies and tactics for first due engines, first due truck, how to accomplish those benchmarks in an efficient and safe manner, the tools and equipment needed, and the mindset needed to get it done. So without further ado, let's kick it off with the senior man here. Jeff, riding the engine for so many years, when you heard that there's a working fire and you're on your way there, what are some of the things that are going through your mind? The crew, the communication, and then once you get there, what are some of the first things that you're looking to do when you get off the back step?
I think it comes down to the organization of the engine and how important it is to have your officer position, your driver, engineer, pump operator position, your nozzle position, and if you're running 4 or more people on your engine, not only the nozzle, but the backup firefighter. So when you're asking about, what's the information you want to start putting in together, I think one of the things, and we've mentioned this whenever we go out and we do the classes, and also I know I've discussed it in my other classes. When the engine is coming into the fire block, okay, the engine turns a corner, you see the fire down there at the end of the street. That's the time to start slowing down, because you want to slow down so everybody can start getting in the right mindset, the right frame of mind to see what's going on. There's so many things that can be happening, like, for example, any environmental impact, like the wind blowing the fire into an exposure that's nearby. It might be a power line that's down. There might be somebody hanging out a window screaming, or you might hear screaming but not see anybody, things like that. So when we're running in there, at 80 miles an hour and we slam on the brakes in front of the building and skid past it, you miss a lot of things. So when it comes to what are we looking for and so forth, number one, the officer is responsible for everything that engine does. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's really a very simple thing, especially having an SOP for your department's engine operations. So example, first due engine at a working fire bread and butter operation, why the engine will be responsible for positioning itself accordingly. Proper size hose line will be stretched to the point of access to the fire area. Make it something simple that everybody on that engine knows and understands. And all you as the officer need to do is, make your size up, make sure that the other guys are ready to go and start stretching and get that nozzle to the access point.
It sounds really simple, but that concept really isn't out there. There's a lot of smaller departments or maybe inexperienced departments that don't really have that mindset or that mantra that we're arriving on an engine. This is our number 1, 2, and 3 priorities. I think it's important. It should be written down. It should be understood and followed. You can make a great point that some may glass over,
Exactly. And it doesn't matter how big your department is or whether it's full-time or career or a combination department. You need something written, something that the members are given when they join the department, something that the department members are trained on. If you're having your meetings, let's just say Wednesday night's your meeting night at the firehouse, just gloss over 1 or 2 of your SOPs to make sure everybody's got them. If you had a previous incident where one of your SOPs came to play, then review it. So you got that opportunity there with something like that. A written SOP, I think, is critical, because especially in volunteer fire departments, but the same thing holds true for career fire departments, and that is you don't know who you're going to get on that call. In other words, when you're responding from home, going to the firehouse, you know what I mean. Who's going to jump on that engine? And if you're the officer, whether you're a lieutenant or a captain on your department or a senior man who's going to be in charge, well, then, see, that's the thing about having everybody trained and educated. First due engines and officer's position, driver's position, nozzle position, backup, and stuff like that, and so forth. I was watching. I don't like to be. I got to say it right here. I want to put the disclaimer out. I don't like being critical of other departments because I don't know how they're set up. But I was watching a department the other day on a working fire. It was a good working fire in a house. Second engine, the guys are stepping off with the tools in their hand, and I was watching it closely, and I was waiting for, that second line to be deployed because it was necessary to have it. But like I said, there's a lot of stuff that happens on the fire ground that you have to have a plan to get it done. Hope that makes sense.
It does, and you can speak to it, and then everybody else on the panel can speak to it too. That this goes across the board, like you said, career, bigger cities, small town fire departments. We may not know who's getting on the engine that day, depending on what's going on with staffing. So somebody floats into your station or onto your shift, you gotta. And then the bell goes off at 7:01. Hey, everybody needs to be on the same mindset. This is our mission. This is the things we need to get done. So, Jerry, can you speak a little bit? What's that?
I was going to ask Mr. Mateer if he has anything to add to that or say to that.
Yeah. Sometimes no one knows when John's going to be there. Being the rover,
Yeah.
Could be the rover lieutenant coming in calling the shots. So
they don't know who they're getting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always 4 new people. Well, 3 new people.
I didn't hear that, John. What?
I said I'm always working with 3 new people every day I go to work. So there's no consistency for me.
Yeah.
So you're right. You have no idea what you're getting when you walk in the door.
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of the business. When you're newly promoted, you may be floating around and hitting, different stations every day. And without the principles and without an SOP, how the heck would you even get started, right? I mean, there needs to be a focus on that mission. So that's really important. So if we could get a little bit into the structure of how the fires go out, so we have our engines and our truck companies. If we have enough people, we would have a rescue or search company. Where does the engine and the truck, where do they meet on the fire ground? Jerry, what's something you can help plug us in here? Where does the engine and truck meet at that house that's on fire?
I think it depends on how much manpower you have too, Jeff. I know my volunteer department was an average volunteer department. Years ago, we ran a quad, which was a pumper with ground ladders. And to Jeff's point about having a plan, our captain, our chiefs drilled into us. When the quad was the first truck out, we would lay a supply line from the hydrant, and the captain always said, I won't help you backstretch it, but I'll help you pick it up if you didn't need it. So we knew our first step was to get a reliable water supply. We also knew that the first line came off of that rig and went to the seat of the fire. So we weren't thinking about rescue early on, but we kind of were, because if the line goes to where the fire is, who are the people that are in the most danger? Those above or close to the seat of the fire. So I thought it was a good plan, because we're kind of by default searching. Of course, if we found a victim, we'd abandon the line and get the victim out. But that plan seemed to work. And the second due guys, however they got there, and sometimes there wasn't second due guys, we were it. They would throw ladders, which provided an escape route for us. They would do the ventilation and kind of follow up and backup line if they needed, that kind of thing. But I think to Jeff's point, we had a firm plan. We could adjust off of that plan, and the truck knew what if a truck showed up, the truck guys knew what we were doing, so they knew what they could do to help us. So that was where we met. Of course, we've got aerials all around us and pumpers out the gazoo, and it's more traditional engine and truck stuff. But I think it's important. Like Jeff always says, look where we came from, and And that basic plan, you can have all the trucks and engines and all the plans and ifs the manuals you want. If you don't have that basic plan, you're behind the power curve to start with.
Yeah. And then you got to kind of bounce off the plan is what do you have to work with on your engine? Are you a pre-connected fire department that's now looking at a long setback, wondering how you're going to overcome that? Or are you a static bed fire department that can do long or short, and it's all pretty much the same? And then it also, what's the fire giving you? Is it a smoker that's not showing, or do you got two windows open? I mean, those are very different fires that make it much easier or much harder. And that comes with, I guess, the evolution of your fire department, of your work service, and how long it takes to get into a routine and establish those plans.
I think your point of alternatives is important. My first two engines now, we have pre-connects. Well, we have a bumper line, for car fires, that kind of stuff, a short bumper line, 2 pre-connects, and static beds off the rear. So, if it's a house on Main Street, that pre-connect works fine. If it's a garden apartment like we have, the pre-connect, we leave that, pull a static bed, So we often get into that, well, you can only do it one way. Well, maybe 2 ways work, but of course that doubles your training issue as well. But two good important points for the engine for sure.
Makes a difference. Chad, you've been working with different types of apparatus where you've gone from engines to quints, and engine and trucks have gotten kind of blurry over the years. What's some of the things that you could take away there for, your first new engine and truck?
Kind of opposite of what John has, where he's with a different crew every day now. I was going to touch on this. You said you have your SOPs that, tell you what to do when you get to a fire. But I think as an officer, it's important that you talk to your guys and make sure you train with your guys. I am very lucky. My guys are really good right now. I love all of them. Wouldn't trade any of them for the world. We've had a couple fires the last week. I don't have to tell them. They know that first line's going in. And I give them the power to decide where it goes in. Most of them have been in our class, and I get off, I do my size up. They've already got the hose line going, and I'm just catching up with them, and we're masking up at the door together. But that's something that you have to talk to. And if I have somebody ride in with me and they're new, we go over it that morning before. Hey, you're riding backseat. If we go in on anything that says smoke or fire, you at least have a water can. If we get to a fire, I'll tell you if we need the big hose, but that our hose is going to the front door until we get told otherwise if we're first in. And that way we don't have to do it once we get there. I know there's people that will say, hey, let's wait and see what we got. But, we're going as fast, we're going slow and steady, but we want to get there quick. As far as me changing and riding a quint, which I thought we weren't going to talk about, it does change things a little bit different. I don't have as much water. My old engine had a 1,000-gallon tank. Truthfully, I never worried about a water supply on that. Now I have like 400. I've got maybe with Shupe's nozzle, I've got a minute and a half. My driver has to hump it to get the water because we're going, and that second-in engine or my medic crew, I have a medic crew that always goes with me, and in our system they are supposed to be RIT team, and they get assigned automatic RIT until the next engine gets there. But what I do is I go, look, you can be RIT. One guy can go get ready, get tools ready. Other guy help my driver get a water supply because 2 minutes goes really quick.
Yeah, Jeff has touched on this. Jeff, the second-in engine or second-in crew, somebody needs to conspire with that engine operator, correct? I mean, that makes the world go around so much faster. If you're showing up, and especially if that second crew is a 4-man engine, I mean, put those drivers together and let them get it figured out and done. They're going to cover a lot more of the building, eyes on the building, troubleshooting. It's needed. You'll be glad they're there.
Diederich, another thing that I've had to start thinking about, which I wasn't used to. Normally, we'd come up on a fire in the engine, hey guys, go past the house. We're working off the rear. We're pulling past and giving the truck. Now I have to. My department has a truck. We have a 105-foot aerial that's coming from the other district. So when that's in play, I go, guys, we're just an engine with defensive capabilities. We're going to still position as an engine if our truck's coming. I'd rather have water on the fire. If it's defensive, then then I'm not going to worry about getting water in the building real quick. So that's another thing I have to remember on the quit. Or if I'm going to one of the quad cities, am I the first aerial in? Am I the aerial that's going to get the building? And that's the other thing I've had to start trying to get used to. But in my district, and I know that Truck 101's coming, I'm still pulling past just like I would on an engine, because the hose comes before the aerial most of the time. Only time I can think, and y'all can correct, hadn't happened yet, is if I've got somebody on a third or fourth floor balcony and I need to get the ladder up there. But even then, water is going to help them just as much. So, can I get water up there fast?
Right, exactly. It's a judgment call. It's situational. As Jeff says a lot, it's geographical. Go ahead, Jeff, take it away. Circumstantial.
And hey, I'd throw this out to y'all because I'm still trying to figure it out because, I've only been woke for the last 8 months on this Quint thing. But I'm also, like I said, hey, if that happens, go ahead and set the aerial. And there's a crew coming behind me every few seconds. I mean, every few minutes. We're on top of each other real quick. Somebody else can climb that if they need to. By the time you get it set, somebody else will be there. I still want to go in with the water. What are y'all's feeling on that for my situation?
I'm thinking if you're showing up and you've got water in the tank and a hose and a nozzle, it's your duty to go put the fire out. Period.
Yeah, but
So think about what happens if we don't get water on the fire, right? We're going to open the front door. Maybe the fire is vented. We've given that fire everything it needs, which is oxygen. So if we're really looking at protecting the civilians, we've made the fire worse while we're hoping and racing to save them. So Chad, I'm with you. It's difficult for us to realize we can't do everything, although it needs to be done. So you got to pick what's the best. I'm with you, Chad. If you have limited people on the scene, limited equipment, put water in the fire. Put water in the fire. And that's not to discount search and rescue. That's probably the best thing you can do at that point.
And what I'm talking about, and Shupe, I'd really love your opinion on this because I haven't had to make this call yet. But if I've got a fire on 3 and I've got people on a balcony on 4 and I'm the aerial, I'm still going in with the fire. There'll be a truck crew coming behind me. My Quint could take the building. My driver can start laddering it, and they can go up my ladder just as easy. I'm going to sit there and wait anyway for the ladder to get up. So I'd rather get in and get water on that fire because that's going to make it better for everybody in the apartment building. Am I off base or am I thinking along the right lines here?
Once again, you're talking about a situation that we'd have to see it to understand it. Yeah. And when we talk about it like this, I can try to picture it. Your aerial device, is it a bucket?
No.
It's not. So it's a stick. You have a stick. Okay. All right. So the other thing is, you're talking about people on the 4th floor and fire on the 3rd floor. What are the conditions of that?
I'm just talking about that scenario where I have to choose water or if I got people hanging on a balcony with smoke coming. Where do I go? I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know what it looks like. But
that's the whole thing about the truck doing truck work and them taking those people and making the pick on them. Mm-hmm. And positioning of the turntable. So the other thing is, okay, how we morphed to this point right now came from the engine, and what are we thinking about? So engine officer, you make sure if you got a situation like that your driver gets that engine out of the way, because that guy should be thinking about the turntable on that aerial device coming in, which direction it's coming in, and is it a midship mount or is it a rear mount or is it a tractor drawn? And so those you give that fire building to the truck, as we say. Trucks command the building. So and the other thing is, if you have to get the engine out of the way, you just made the case for static hose beds. You're talking about a multi-story structure. The engine's got to get out of the way. You can't argue against it. Pre-connected lines, not at this point. So that's these are things that whoever the engine officer is, whoever the truck officer is, and all these things are coming together under a situation like that. Like I said, it's easier to see it and understand it that way rather than just talk about it and throw things out. It's like the what if this department,
And of course, I'm looking for that silver bullet that Jerry always talks about. There is no right answer. You have to make that decision when you get there. There's not one answer that fits. And I've always said, hey, guys, we are an engine with a stick on top of it. It makes our hose bed smaller. It makes everything smaller. We have less water. How do we deal with this? We're an engine that has less capabilities than most, but we can go defensive.
Chad, I think you won't know, obviously, till it's over if you made the right call. And like Jeff said, we're doing what if, we really, it really doesn't work. I think what the critical factor in your scenario is, what do you want your driver to do? Because he can't hit the hydrant, he can't get the pump running, and he can't set the ladder up all at the same time. So you got to pick one. And I saw a local department do this. They lost a house to a basement fire because the guy in the first due quint was setting up the ladder, and they never got water in the fire. And the fire came out of the basement, got the first floor, got the second floor, and went through the roof. But the stick was up, So the circumstances are, what are the critical factors? And I think that's the critical factor for you. And I think you're on it. Do I put everybody to engine work, or do I put everybody to truck work? And I just emotionally, if somebody's on that fourth floor balcony with fire looking at their butt, it's going to be hard not to put that stick up and get them.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was like, let's get the engine work going. And I really hope I don't have to make that decision, because I do know that I have two more aerials coming behind me. So I'm going with, I'm an engine with a stick on top of it.
There you go. And whatever happens. I mean, you won't, it's beyond your control, It's a good scenario though.
A motivated crew can do anything, but they can't do everything. So it's all circumstantial at that point. Well, if we can,
firefighting is a game of numbers. And the resource categories you have to work with are your apparatus, the number of apparatus you have, the equipment you have on them, but the most important thing is the personnel. The amount of personnel, how well trained they are, how they work together, and all those other things that go along with it. So coordination, fire ground, accountability, the whole 9 yards, and the SOPs that we mentioned a little bit ago.
I think, just real quick, I think a lot of departments are in this predicament about resources. I know a lot of our guys have gone down south to the Carolinas and Virginia to take career jobs, and they're rolling out with a driver and one guy. So I think these discussions.
I experienced that.
Yeah. So I think these discussions that we're having are very important to a lot more people than we think.
Oh yeah, well, when I was down south, that's what I experienced down there. And when I tried to bring about, hey, we need a minimum of an officer, driver, firefighter, it was like, we don't do it like that. Well,
yeah.
So you train your guys, how to do a forward lay, how to operate off the tank, and things like that, and or how to catch the hydrant on the way into a fire. And then your next in apparatus drops a guy off to operate the hydrant when the pump operator at the fire calls for water. So that's one way. So you got to be resourceful when you're in those situations. Yeah.
So if we can get out of the what if scenario here and kind of talk more about
Thanks, Chad.
No, it's all about it. Showing up first due. I had mentioned, Jerry, that so the things that affect your strategy and tactics, what the fire's showing you, right? So if it's if it's a smoke shower, or if maybe fire showing, it could dictate, well, this is an engine man's fire or this is a truck man's fire, depending on what it's looking like. But let's get into how the engine is set up. Is your engine set up for for your mission. We've identified that we need to have the mission penned and inked so everybody knows what it is, but is the engine set up to help us accomplish that mission? So we've touched on pre-connected versus static bed, and we've talked about engine placement, whether you're in front of the building or away. It could be very situational, circumstantial, but in general, the principles, what we like to see is let there be choices, long and short. Should not be reliant on a pre-connected plan. Any thoughts or want to go a little more deeper into that? Let's have it. So, Jeff, you want to go first?
Yeah. I know we've talked about this before, setting up our engines to be, quote, war wagons. And you don't have to get crazy carried away having all these pre-connected lines. You don't. Or having all kinds of lines all over the bed or all over the engine. But you do have to have a plan. And that plan should be put together to how to set up your engines by the community or the neighborhood that you're working in. Now, when you're working in a big operation like where John and I come from, and you got a whole bunch of engines out in the street, there needs to be standardization. And for departments, Jeff, much like where you've come from, but those departments that you work with and run with on a regular basis, there needs to be some standardization in your engines among those departments. So when you go and work from another engine, you go on a mutual aid or automatic aid fire, and you go to the incident commander, you get an order to go stretch a line. It's a good thing to have some standardization. Nozzles is one of those. Hose beds, amount of hose, and things like that. So, you don't run into that situation where, gee, we never saw this nozzle before. You're in a smoky hallway, you're calling for water, and this thing doesn't work, So standardization among your engines and their equipment like that, even for smaller departments, is I think, critical. So when it comes to the number of attack hose beds, that's a tough one but I will say this, because I've been a proponent of, look, you got the NFPA standards that say you're supposed to have 400 feet of 1.5 or larger attack hose in a 3.5 cubic foot compartment as the minimums. We shouldn't be looking at the minimums when we're setting up engines. We should be looking at, once again, having a few hose beds that are able to provide, like for example, whether you operate your engines out the back, or if you have crosslays, or you run a combination of crosslays and out the back, okay, have enough hose in them to do the job, to make the stretch, so you're not having to break the coupling, piece a couple of hose lengths in there to make the stretch and so forth. No, you should never run into that situation. There's enough information, education, and events out there that we should have learned from about hose stretching to say, you know what, we shouldn't be an all pre-connect engine. We should have at least one static hose bed just for those situations, so forth. So, but getting back to the number of hose beds, I would like to see engines. You have a bed out the back for your supply line, your LDH. You have a bed of 2.5 out the rear. If you're going to have plumbing out the rear, put a Y on it like we do back home. And you can have a bed of 1 3/4 and a bed of 2 inch, or 2 beds of 1 3/4 out the back, and still have enough hose to make the stretches for multiple lines. What about the crosslays? Okay. One of the best things I saw, and it made so much sense, and it was so simple, and I think they're still doing it on their engines. That was Los Angeles years ago. We were out there, God, Jer, I think that was 2005. We were out there. And they had these engines that I was looking at, they had like 3 wide beds of crosslays. That's the other thing. You see, you look at some of these engines today, how they design their crosslays, it's a single stack. goes up like this. So you're very limited on how much hose you can put in there to begin with. So that can have an adverse effect on your stretching of your attack lines. If I recall, they were static beds, cross lays. And one guy would grab it, go off that way. Another guy would come, go to the second bed. If they needed a second line, he was off to the races. And it just seemed so simple, as we have talked about. So anyway, that making sense?
Yeah, I like it. I think everybody should have the option. And when we've been out there, working with different departments and areas and conferences, we've said if you need to break the ice, put a smooth bore on a bed of 2.5. Let that be your ambassador to not only a smooth bore nozzle, but also the ambassador to having a static bed. Because when you get to the big fires, chances are it's going to be a longer stretch, and you're going to need the flexibility. It's a good place to start.
Let me throw this out while we're on the subject of a bigger fire. Okay, so one of the things I do is I like to remind people you need to read the older authors' material, and one of those guys in particular was William Clark, Firefighting Principles and Practices, and how he talked about if we have our one engine close to the fire and we're pulling all these attack lines off it, eventually you're going to run out of hose or have enough hose to do what you got to do. This is why at bigger fires, he was talking about one time about the wisdom of having different engines on water sources located strategically throughout the fire area, which is, I think, one of the things we wanted to talk about tonight was strategic concerns. So at a major fire, let's just say you're in an older city and you've got these old 4 and 5 story heavy timber construction, warehousing, factory complexes, and so forth. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because the other thing is your municipal water supply. If those are older buildings in an old Rust Belt neighborhood, chances are good that your water supply isn't going to be that good anyhow. So don't focus everything on one engine, okay? That's how you kind of run out of your equipment real fast, or you put yourself behind the 8 ball, because if the fire moves through that building and goes down the block, or it lights exposures on fire, well, now what do we do? So that's where I say strategic consideration for the placement of engines and where they go on hydrants at and so forth.
I think that could be a common mistake where we get used to running that bread and butter, the attack engine. We're running multiple lines off it, in a big balloon frame house. We're used to seeing that. Okay, there's 2-3 lines coming off one engine. You get to a larger commercial fire, and you may fall into that same mindset. There's one engine, let's pull everything off of that. And there's not enough water in the ground for it, and so eventually you figure it out, you get to your 5, 10, 15 roll, and you're looking like there's not enough water in the ground here for us. We need to, set up another plan of attack. I mean, the idea is to be ahead of that as a strategy, don't not be reacting to it.
I talked to Frank Brannigan at FDIC a few years ago, and we were talking about identifying the hazards in a building. And he looked at me and said, "Jesus, Jerry, did that building just land from Mars?" I'm like, "No, it's been there for 30 years. And his comment was, "Why didn't you know?" Same with engine company stuff. That hydrant, we shouldn't be figuring out that we can't get enough water out of a hydrant ahead of time. And I don't know why. My department is scared to death to talk to the water company. I don't get it. I mean, they just flatly refuse. And I have, the little contact we've had with the water company is like, holy crap, you mean that's all the water we got? And most water systems are gravity feed system. And in our case, the one area of our town is fed by a tank on a hill. And we said, well, we can get 2,000 gallons a minute out of these 2 hydrants together. And the water guy goes, well, yeah, you'll get that for about an hour. And we're like, what? He goes, you're going to drain my tank. You're going to take it out faster than I can put it in. I'm like, holy crap, that's pretty exciting. Why didn't we know? So I think it goes back to what Jeff was saying. You got to have your mission. Your mission is to get water in the fire. And why don't we know what these hydrants flow? If you go to your ISO report, it'll tell you what a lot of hydrants flow across your area. It's there. It's free. It's done. And God, we have got to talk with our water company because so many firemen think you get unlimited amount of water out of that red thing sticking out of the ground. And it's like, no, especially if it's in a rust belt old section. Holy crap. And we know what happens, right? You open a hydrant, you put the water into a large diameter hose. And what do? You suck out all the grit and all the stones and beer cans and dead rats and whatever else is in there, right? And if you're lucky, it goes through your pump, it gets ground up. And then where does it stop? It stops. If you're using an automatic nozzle, all that stuff clogs up the nozzle. And guess what? You're in a world of hurt. So we got to think about these things. And we don't, I don't know. I'm just getting old and grouchy, but it doesn't take, you see these things, you go, okay, well, let's not do that again. Oh yeah, well, let's do that again. Okay. That was fun. No, it wasn't fun.
This is the problem. You stick around longer than one generation, guys. You end up seeing us repeat the same mistakes, and you're like,
yeah, it's like, we already did that once. Hey, going back real quick to the engine, I think there's going to be three things to the layout, right? You got to have a supply hose, right? And then you got to have small, medium, large beds, right? This is what we teach with strategic fire. Small is 1.75 inches, room, 2 rooms, right? 1.75 inches. Medium is 2 inch or 2.5, so you're up to 250, 60, 70 gallons a minute. And large is maybe a portable monitor. So you have only a few guys. You got a big fire. You can get big water on it with a couple of guys. So small, medium, large, I think how you do that, how you stack it, you can tie it in a bow. I don't care, but you better be ready to apply small, medium, and or large amounts of water quickly.
Yeah. Right. That comes down to the water tank in your truck. Chad mentioned earlier about the quints. If you follow NFPA standards and you want to buy a quint for your department, something's going to give. You got a pump, and now you want a water tank, but you got an aerial device, and then you got ground ladders in most cases. Okay. What's the lowest number of gallon water tank you could have on a quint and still have a Class A standard by NFPA standards for your quint? Anybody know?
Is it 200 gallons?
350 gallons.
I've got 400. Golden.
Oh boy, that's forward thinking.
Actually, I have 370 because 30 gallons of long tanks.
Just enough to fill up about a 250 foot long 2.5 there, Chad. Good job.
There you go. Yeah.
We're stuck in the next one. If we get another quint, which I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to talk them out of it, we're not going to get a foam tank. Foam's bad anyway.
So what's bad?
Foam is.
Oh yeah, foam. Forget it. You can't carry it.
It's illegal in New York.
Is it really?
Yeah, I was going to ask y'all, damn Yankees, and your water problems. I don't have that. My only water problem is my tank's too small.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, so I think we're at a good spot here. We could talk, kind of shift gears into the coordinated fire attack part of it. My two fire examples were one that's just a lot of smoke and it's not showing, and the other is where you got two windows open and fire's coming out of the building. A coordinated fire attack for those scenarios is going to be different because the needs are different based on the ventilation profile of that example. So where does the engine company and the truck company meet when they get in there? I mean, we know that the engine's crawling in and we're looking for the fire. We're looking to put water on the seat. Whereas the truck company is looking to ventilate the building for fire and for life. How do we make these two trades come together in a successful way?
Well, once again, what's the situation? Is it a 2-story frame with fire coming out of a couple of windows on the second floor? Or is it a 2-story frame with fire coming out of windows on the first floor?
Well, let's call it a 2-story frame, and you've got a lot of smoke, and we got some fire showing from the basement window and a first floor window.
Oh, okay. Okay. So right now you have extension to the first floor and just bet on it. If it's an older home, it's balloon frame construction, you've got fire going into the second floor. Right, John?
Yeah, John's having some trouble with his internet.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be through the whole building.
Yeah. And here again, we talk about the hose beds on your engines. Having the ability to lay multiple attack lines quickly and easily. And again, standardization of your equipment and so forth, because you're going to have several different engine crews in there. The truck, once again, they got to get the building. If you're saying a 2-story frame structure, Jeff?
Yeah, 2-story frame.
Okay, basement fire, again, figure it's already upstairs. So they might need to get the stick up to the attic windows. And also try to channel the fire. Hopefully they'll be thinking about channeling that fire up and out of that structure. Very, very tough, because older homes, balloon frame construction, probably have been remodeled sometime in their life. Okay. You know how it is with some homes, they've been let go maintenance wise. Others, some people, have pride in their homes and they take care of them. You don't know what you're going to run into though. So, but and you have to have an order. In other words, the access to the first floor might be there for that first line, but the problem is the fire's below you. That's its point of origin. So, if you have another crew arriving, you could hear them coming on the scene or whatever. You got to think about cutting that or getting that line into the basement. Because you can go to the first floor, but as long as the basement fire is feeding it up the channels, both the external walls and the internal walls and the old plumbing ductwork or the furnace ductwork, you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
So it's a tough fire when you talk about situations like that.
Yeah, coordinating that fire, I think, is the bigger challenge. I think talking about bedroom fires, or the upstairs fire is kind of a bread and butter slam dunk. But when you have fire in 2 or more floors, especially if one of them is the basement, that's a sticky fire. And I think the coordination is really key that truck company needs to think about. How do we ventilate that basement as quickly as we can? How do we, facilitate a search as quick as we can while the engine is operating? And that's going to be tough.
I want to throw something out here right now, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jerry. Okay? In the past, we always felt we had to get that line down the basement because there's an old axiom of the fire service. If you save the stairs, then you save the building. But again, taking a look at this building, this older building with balloon frame construction and so forth, have we come to the point where we realize, and again, you might be a situation with 3 people on that engine for the first couple of minutes. Would it be best if you have fire coming out the basement windows, as you said, and out the first floor windows, maybe we better get an outside hit on this thing to slow it down? I mean, I'm talking about the basement windows to get water in there quickly. Mm-hmm. Jer, what do you got? What's your take on that one? Is that anything that we got from the studies?
Yeah, the UL basement studies showed that and FDNY did it, I want to say it's at least 10 years ago now, Governor's Island, a basement fire with fire showing out a basement window. If you put the water in that basement window, there's a good chance you're going to get water directly on a fire. Now, you can argue there may be a room, there may be a room, the basement may be subdivided and your water's not getting on the fire, sure. But I think the other thing is to, like Jeff says, circumstances. How many people are showing up to this fire? If this is FDNY and they got 35 guys in the front, the first alarm, they can vent, they can put a line to the basement, a line to the first floor, a line to the second floor. If it's like most other fire departments, we got limited manpower. So maybe the best, again, this is a what if, but maybe the best thing is if you have limited manpower, that first hose line calms that fire down in the basement, then maybe even operates in that fire on the first floor just by holding the line steady, right? We know if we move the nozzle in a circular motion, a solid bore, we're going to push in about 6,000 cubic feet of air. We don't want to do that, right? So maybe after you knock that basement fire down, you knock down that first floor fire by just holding the nozzle steady, bouncing it off the ceiling in that first floor, and then maybe even do the same thing in the second floor. But again, the nozzle technique is important. It's not operating the nozzle like we've been taught, because if we operate that smooth bore in a circular motion, a T, a Z, an N, whatever the hell you want to do, right? You're going to push in, just by virtue of the water going in, about 6,000 cubic feet of air per minute. Right now, an electric smoke ejector with a half-inch or a half horsepower motor, right, is about 7,000 cubic feet of air per minute. So we don't want to be doing this if we're doing the outside attack. And again, if you show up with 30 guys, it's a different story. You show up with 3, maybe that's your best shot. It's an option. You gotta use your head.
And that's another thing. Water is so critical. This is the kind of fire that you're going to have somebody talk about. They're going to say, "Oh, somebody's in there. Oh, well, okay, let's go search for the victim," without putting water in a fire. And that's no, you can't. You have an out of control situation simply by throwing firefighters into the building without any fire control efforts. You're looking for a bigger problem, is what you're looking for. Okay.
Think about the fire dynamics. Searching sounds like the moral and high ground and the right thing to do. But what do we do if we do that? We're going to open the door, right? We're going to open the door. We're going to give that fire more air. If it's the fire blowing out those 2 windows, now we've got a flow path, and we've all been there. We've all been at the door and seen the smoke, seen the clear air coming in underneath the smoke, and we know that's just feeding the fire. And we know now from the studies that may not be the right thing to do. And to Jeff's point, this fire is out of control. And like we said earlier, you can't have everything. We think we can do everything. Firemen can make a bowling ball fly if we want to. We just can't do it all, like Jeff Diederich said, at the same time. So circumstantial, you got to use your head,
Here's another thing we've said in the past. Depending on the severity of the situation, if there was a sprinkler head in there, what would it be doing?
10
So
gallons.
why wouldn't we be throwing water when we go in there?
But again, throwing it the right way.
Oh, absolutely. Right. That's what nozzle mechanics and hose line management are all about.
And I think the key is not to stay there. And, like Jeff said, knock the fire down and get your buns inside, because that's where it's happening, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, good.
And this is something that we've always been doing. If we have the advantage or the angle on the seat of a fire from any place, whether it's on the front porch or next to the basement window or from the hallway, the moment we have a direct angle on that fire, we should be operating the nozzle. That's just how we do it. But where the message gets lost is, what do you really think you're putting water on the seat of the fire? And in a basement, you have more of that horizontal angle where you could probably, that stream, if there were no interior walls, can certainly hit any part of that structure in that room. Versus if it's an upper floor, you've got access to the ceiling of that one area that you're aiming at. So could just be the leading edge of the fire that's in the room across the hall, with a couple opening doors between it. So that, in that respect, you need to be inside, and your direct angle of attack is from the hall. So, that's one of the things that got lost in the translation.
Volume of fire. Anything else? Hey, John, you there? You were frozen. John, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. I'm going to throw out Warner Road as an example. Definitely a need for multiple lines. That was a 3-line job. And the fires that we would have on Warner Road with the size of those places, you're talking about an attic that really is a 3rd floor. You got, your typical 7-foot ceilings, they're finished, and you can either be, probably was a kid's bedroom or a couple of kids' bedrooms at one time. or once again, we talk about the remodeling of these places, which is now an apartment. So, you've got those critical situations where the fire's running in the void spaces and so forth. One of the things we talked about with line placement, again, 3 people, that's a tough situation. Jerry makes a great point about, you got to be mobile. Yeah, give it the outside hit if you have to, but then get the line inside. But as more people come on the scene and we start deploying more lines, we got a line going to the first floor, and we get that line into the basement first, if we can. Line goes to the first floor, and line goes to the second floor, and line goes to the third floor or the attic, whatever it is, and you hold your position. And that's the whole thing about coordination now between trucks and engines, but also communications. So you got truck guys, whether it's you got 1 or 2 truck guys available per floor, you got to open up the ceilings and walls. That's a very tough situation. We got the fire running that fast in those buildings. So anyway.
So if we could, if we could talk about the multiple line scenario, I think it's important that we touch on that first in crew. They make it to where they've been assigned, and who's ever the third person on that line may find themselves at a turn, or an obstacle, maybe the bottom of the stairs, whatever the case is. As the second line goes by, work that turn for them as well, right? Don't get sucked into where they're going or taking that first line and putting it where it hasn't been assigned. Stand your post. If the second line's going up and you're the third guy in the first line, hey, send all 3 of those guys up because they got 2 or 3 more turns to negotiate. Work that turn for them. Stay where you're assigned as an accountable, tactic. I mean, it's a smart play that some people may not either remember or think or even heard of, but stand your post and work those turns for any fire hose that may be going by. And if you happen to be fortunate enough to have that dedicated truck company there, and the guy's standing there with his hook, and he's standing at an obstacle, help with the line. Because as soon as the nozzles go down, then we need the hooks up. So you're going to get your turn. Help us get the line where it needs to go. Yeah. Chad, you got anything? I see you grinning over there. Is that just somebody?
Just happy to be here.
Just happy to be here. You're going to get your turn. I was thinking, the truck does have to help. But sometimes I'm like, no, don't touch the hose. It'll be fine. We'll get it. Thank you.
Yeah, depending on who it is. Good point.
Hey, by the way, okay, so now that we're talking, stretching into different levels. Again, it was talked about earlier with our hose beds and the hose loads and how we stretch. And again, all the more reason to keep it simple. So whether you have a front stairway in this apartment building, or you might have a center hall stairway where you got to stretch down the side of the building, then into the hallway and go up to the floor and then down the hallway to an apartment that's on fire. Once again, you've just made the case for static hose lines, static beds and things like that. So, but that nozzle, the person on the nozzle needs to have the nozzle and the working length. Okay. What's the working length? The first 50 feet of hose, which is attached to the nozzle. So that person takes it to the drop point and they flake it out from there, make the call for water. And of course, the pump operator should acknowledge that, and here comes the water. It's a simple thing to do. And it's a talent and it's a discipline for stretching lines like that. But it gives the people making the attack enough hose to do the job rather than running short. So,
yeah.
One thing real quick, Jeff, and I know you always, or Shupe, you always say it, and I don't want to go into why. If you're going up a stairway, keep the hose to one side of the stairs, the outside stairs, please, down the center.
Hey, Jeff D, just a thought on your two scenarios there. One, just some light smoke showing, I guess, what you were getting at, right? And one with heavy fire showing. I don't see a whole lot difference from an engine perspective. Both of those fires need a hose line. We open that door, that little puffy smoke, and it lights up. You better have a good hose line with you. With fire blowing out the windows, we know we want water on the fire is decisive amounts of water. So probably the only question there is what size hose are we going to pull? But again, pulling up on the engine is like, okay, this is what we're here for. Get water, get ready.
Right. I got one for John to think about. Because he was the nozzle man, and it wasn't Fleet Avenue. It was Lansing Avenue that one morning. Do you remember? It's where the apartment. So we were the first due engine. And it was one of those, where we had the stores on the first floor, the apartments above. You stretch down the hallway or down the alleyway to the center hallway, up the stairs. And we were the first engine, so John's got the nozzle coming. He's got the working length. And there was somebody giving a report, and they're yelling up the stairways at us. They think there's a guy in there. They think there's a guy in there. And this is like 8:30 in the morning, so it had all the things that would make you think that maybe there is a guy in there and so forth. The hallway was as clear as the rooms we're in right now, and you had the definite odor of working fire. And in our department, one guy from the truck is known as the forcible entry guy, and he takes his tools and meets up with the engine team. So you're talking about how the guys come together there. And so I told him, I said, don't take the door. Don't take the door. We don't have the line here yet. Oh, but there's somebody in there. Well, see, here's that thing Jerry is talking about. The moral issue is we got to break this door down and get in there and rescue this person. We don't even know if they're in there. John came up with the nozzle. I said, okay, good. We got our masks on, ready to go. Open up the door, and it was right down to the floor and black. And it was like, oh, man. Like he said, the hallway was as clear as the rooms that we're in right now. Thankfully, the truck vented the windows out front. So as we opened up, we came through the rear, and I mean, this everything in this joint was burned, charred, black, except for the one bedroom across where the fire started. In that room, it was charred right down to the baseboards. So, the moral of the story is, I was talking to a couple of officers in the battalion. We're standing in the living room that was all burned out afterwards. And the chief officer says, I think we got kind of lucky here. It had all the makings of a backdraft. Should we have broken that door down, we would have had nothing to protect us if it would have lit up with explosive force. And we would have had nothing to protect ourselves with or had to hit the fire at that point and so forth. So that's what you run into. And it's kind of hard to think, no, just hold on. He's going to be, here he comes and so forth. Okay, good. Get everything together. But this is what a company level officer or senior firefighter in charge has got to watch for. So going back to how we started this thing, we came into the block. Okay, I'm talking about tonight's show. We come into the block, you want to slow down. You want to start looking at things. You want to start putting information together for your size up and so forth. And then as the incident progresses onward, then you have to do whatever, necessary and so forth. And, you can't let the emotion dictate your decisions. So.
Yeah, taking a pause for the cause, as it were, where you're trying to think your way through the fire versus just reacting through it. I like to remind our younger people when I'm trying to show them something is like, you've been waiting to go to your fire for weeks or months. You're finally here. Take it all in. Slow down. Think about what you're doing. Don't just react to the fire. Think about, wait for that water to return. Wait for some smoke lift. Listen for the glass breaking from the guys working outside for you. Those things make the fire come together, as a as a thinking fireman versus just reacting to it. So we've been at it here, guys, for just about an hour. What other fine points can we throw on this before we wrap it up here on our strategy and tactics? I mean, Shupe, I know we can go another hour easy, but what do you think?
He's just getting warmed up.
I know.
I was going to say, throw a fire situation at us, I mean, vary it, from residential to commercial to apartment houses to, I don't know.
Let's hit the multiple dwellings really quick. Chad's been playing around with multiple dwellings his whole career. So it's kind of his forte. But you get the alarm for a multiple dwelling, and Chad has mentioned before, you never get off the rig without water, whether it's a water can or a hand line. So in that case, you're investigating, but now you and maybe one other firefighter are now maybe a couple stories away from the rest of your equipment. Fire's going bang. What's your next steps? How are you going to make it?
So it depends on how big the building is for me. Yes, we are going up with a water can. If I'm going more than 5, if it's a 7-story, I'm going with a water can and a high-rise pack, or my 2-inch hose, not high-rise, standpipe kit. Hopefully, if we get there, they never come in. You never see them working. You have to go find them. And if it's less than 5 stories, my water can has a 50-foot rope on it. So once that's set up, I can go a floor below real quick. I can do a rope drop. I can get my hose up there that way. These buildings that I'm dealing with, they are massive length. And, you have to walk them. You have to know where your FDC connections are. But, that FDC connection in that standpipe is not quick. And everything, and I started really using this and putting it in my 5-story and apartments and under. Once I started running with you guys, I can get water up there a lot faster if I'm just using hose and going out the outside, because these aren't big, we call everything standpipe firefighting and not high rise or mid rise or whatever, but these are just room and content fires. These are apartments that are 40 feet up in the air. I don't need a lot of water. I need water there quickly. What's the fastest way for me to get it there? And go ahead, boss.
Are these buildings sprinklered?
Yes, sir. Until they're not. Depends on if they got fixed after the freeze or not.
Okay. And it's coming again for you folks down there.
Yeah, it is. I've got 6 months. I don't have to worry about standpipes and sprinklers breaking.
Okay, so we talked about SOPs earlier in this program. Do you have an SOP that says one of the first arriving engines shall hook up to the fire department connection? Or do you wait until you have a working fire?
So on these apartment complexes, they're all sprinklered. They all have panels. Our first in engine, most of our entrance into the building is where the FDC is. So what my driver's job is, my engineer, he'll go into the panel, he'll tell me where it is, he'll confirm it. And then while he's waiting, because if this turns into be a full standpipe operation, that opens up a whole nother SOP. But if he's sitting there, just sitting at the panel, my driver will start hooking up. He'll start hooking up to the FDC. It's right there. And he won't charge it until I call for it, because, sometimes you go up there, pardon me?
Well, yeah, I've seen some departments that they want one of the first engines in the scene, that's how it was termed, to hook up to the standpipe and await for instructions. Simple order like that. So
I usually tell him if it's the real deal, he'll hear me scream without my radio. He'll hear me yelling for water without the radio. But if they're 5 and under, I've raced it at the tower. The rope, whether it's a well hole, whether it's the outside building, go to a safe area. There's fire doors all over these things, because 200 feet could be eaten up in a hallway, really. You just have to find the closest place. It's almost like, and I actually, it's whether or not that hallway's dirty or clean, and get to where the fastest place I can do it. And I mean, we have a lot of hotels that are 3 and 4 stories that we do the same thing on because, yeah.
I think it's important that, it's a great tactic. It certainly is efficient and quick. As long as you can get 2 doors closed between you and the fire before you commit to pulling, you need to make sure you got some time between you and the fire room. But yeah, that's a winner all day. Get into a multiple dwelling with a water can and a rope bag can really lighten up your day for sure.
So did that when you started doing that, how was that accepted, or was that one of those things from whatever?
Well, everybody looked at me really weird at first. I did it at the tower with my guys first, and it was a standpipe operation. We were doing a standpipe operation on the 3rd floor, and so we did it to the standpipe, and I go, hey, guys, let's try a different way. And I had a rope bag, and I went to a window and dropped the rope, and we pulled the hose right up. And I think we had it up before the standpipe was connected. We timed it. And so you have to practice it, and you have to know how to do it. And, of course, it's morphed with Diederich's help. My water can, the rope bag is actually built into the strap on the water can now. So, it's there. It actually makes the water can easier to carry because you have a bigger thing into your shoulder when you're carrying it. And then I became a lieutenant. I started doing this when I was a driver because that was when I started running around with y'all. And then I went to my new shift, and we had a fire in the hotel, and the chief said he assigned my engine to get water to the fire floor. And I told him I was going to do it, and he goes, I assigned you that. It's not. I just wanted to see you drop a rope and put hose outside the building, and I did it. It worked great. If you practiced it, it works great. If you try it on, hey, I heard these guys talking about it on a podcast, I may try this. It's not going to go so well.
It's a good idea to identify some targets in your first do where you think it might work, and then maybe go give it a try.
And then y'all come down here and back me up several times. Weatherford is one of the places where they use it now because they're getting all these multi things and these mid-rise monsters. So.
And if you're hemmed up with a pre-connected engine, you could pull that 200 foot right out of the cross layer right up into the 3rd floor. Yeah. And, then some light bulbs start going off. Wow.
Oh, yeah. I have pulled, look, I joked about it. I said, look, eventually I'm going to figure out how to make a zip line out of the hose line, and I'll come up with an escape system. And I'll get one of the smoke divers to test it out and zip down the hose line if you need to bail out quickly. But, it works. The only other thing I can tell you is you do have to tie off the hose when you get up to the top.
That's right.
That's one of those things that if you don't practice it, you'll find out the hard way.
Well, a rope hose tool was something that used to be around in commonplace. Was then replaced by a piece of webbing or a house strap, and everybody should have those on their gear. They should have something to tie.
That's one of those tools that still should be around.
Yep. You got to be able to tie it off.
Real quick, and I've talked to Jerry and I've talked to Shupe about this. I think where we start to get confused, and what I've been fighting down here, is everybody equivalates standpipe firefighting with high-rise firefighting. But these aren't high-rises. Our high-rise policy, our 3rd-in engine is getting the water, the FTC. That's way too long. So you kind of break apart what is high-rise firefighting and what is standpipe firefighting. Now, if it's in a building that's 17 stories in my district, I'm not going to do a rope drop. Then I'm relying on fire pumps. I'm relying on, it's a whole different ballgame. But I don't think there's policies for mid-rises and high-rises.
Let me ask you something. Who's the 3rd engine? You only have 2 engines on your department.
Yeah, that's kind of the.
So you're waiting for the neighboring departments to respond in and get your water?
That's the Quad Cities policy. What we're doing is, hey, if you're by the FTC, hook it up. I mean, yeah, we do all respond but it's not fair to ask another city to know where all my standpipes are and my FTCs are. So that's something that we're in the flux. And as soon as I get done with some things, I'll start picking y'all's brain on how to rewrite this high-rise thing and standpipe policy.
Yeah. Well,
it's on the to-do list.
And the more experience you have, the more fires you get as the years go by, the more it's going to tailor your operation, and you'll end up writing that SOP to reflect what has worked. I mean, that's how it's probably going to go.
Wow.
Yeah.
The other thing are you dealing with combination risers?
Sometimes.
And there's a situation that's been created by the codes that we should be looking at and saying we need 2 engines on a system.
One for the sprinkler, one for the standpipe.
Well, for volume and pressure, because it's all coming off the same riser. Mm-hmm. And anytime you're dealing with a high-rise building and so forth, then you got all that elevation to overcome. And if you're talking a 6-inch pipe, that's why you need a second engine to be on that system also. You can't rely. See, this is the thing about departments that they're not thinking outside the box for those types of situations. Those are very, very delicate situations. You guys have went through this with the broken pipes and so forth, the weakened pipes from all the freezing and so forth. And here again, we see that all the time up here in the wintertime. In fact, it's going to be 48 degrees tonight up here. So, but
I remember the night I called you almost crying because I never thought I would ask what to do with a frozen hydrant.
Yeah, right. So
it's something I hadn't encountered in 23 years. We could probably do a whole nother show on this topic alone.
Yeah, we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, the multiple dwellings. Yeah, we should do that. Well, let's wrap this one up. This has been great. I think that we touched on a lot of the subjects when it comes to deciding strategy and tactics. We talked about how the engine and the truck get along and where they meet at the different types of fires. We've even gone into the weeds a little bit about the what-if scenarios. We've talked about the multiple dwellings and investigation to firefighting and how to do that quickly and efficiently. So I think we've hit quite a bit. Jerry, you want to get us going here on the send-off? Any other thoughts?
Two real important things. The mission and engine company is to get water in a fire. How you do that, decisive amounts of water quickly. How you do that is up to you, but you got to understand what your mission is. And the second thing is, like Jeff D., like you said, when you pull up on the block there and you're looking down the street, and what phase is this fire in? Where is it on the fire curve? Does it need air? Has it got all the air it needs? Is it close to a backdraft, like Jeff was saying? Where is it on the fire curve? And if you can get those two things together, you're a good long way to success with your engine company.
Yeah, I would agree. Shupe, Chad, you guys want to chime in?
I'm good. For everybody that follows us, we'll see you in South Dakota next week.
That's right.
Yeah, SFT. We're going to be up there in Watertown, South Dakota, making it rain. So that'd be nice.
State Fire School, so it should be a good crowd there, and yeah, that'll be fun.
All right. Jeff?
I think you guys done a great job recapping. So
Okay.
all things engine, and we really haven't touched on all things engine. We really haven't. There's so many things out there, related to engines. But remember, as you guys said earlier, anyhow, you guys all hit on it. Engines are responsible for water work. So
Show with the water. All right, guys. Well, to everybody out there, thanks for tuning in and sticking with us. And hopefully next episode, John, we'll get you in the mix a little bit if you get some better technology over there, buddy.
Yeah, we get John in here.
Yeah.
John, we miss you, John. There you go.
All right, everybody else. Thanks for tuning in.